Welcome everybody this morning to our history chat. And this morning we have our guest speaker is Carolyn Rahe, and she will be talking about her interest and her work in saving barns. Okay?
Thank you. I'm excited about the problem. We have not much room, so that's great to see everybody here. And it just tells me how much interest there is in barns. I was thinking, it's strange that coming to this Bremen hotel, which is now considered historical, was just part of my childhood. So I don't think of my childhood as being historical now, but I guess it's getting that way. And some of you might know me as Carolyn Meyer, because I grew up here in Bremen, and I went to high school in Bremen. I graduated in 1980. And I also got thinking this morning that if those of you who knew me in high school probably would have voted me the least likely to come and talk about barns. And my parents probably would have voted me the least likely of their children to have a farm. So you never know what you expose your kids to, what's going to come back to haunt you. Because now I've got a farm, I'm calling my mom and dad at midnight, 5 o'clock in the morning to help me come and pull a calf. So you never know what's going to come back around when you expose your kids to different experiences. And that's kind of what I'm not a barn historian, I'm not a technical advisor, I can't tell you how to replace your foundation, but what I have is just experiences and history and stories, and I hope that today you'll just you'll look at barns a little bit differently when you pass them on the road. And think about, they are a treasure that's disappearing, and I'm hoping that people can work together to try to save the barns that are left. When you look at barns, think about, instead of just passing them, think about the trees, the native timbers that were felled, and the hand-hewn beams that were carved by hand to make these barns, and appreciate the ones that are well cared for. If you go by a barn and just look at them, it's really hard to maintain a barn, so think about the people that put their time and energy and money into maintaining their barns. I feel like barns kind of grew out of the earth because they are made from the native timbers of Indiana. So the only place that you're going to see those native timbers is in these barns. Some of them in Indiana have been around for 200 years. And when people settled in Indiana, all over, a lot of farmers, the first thing they did was put up a barn before they even built their house. So I told you I'm not going to be a barn expert, but I will share my stories with you. And barns were just part of the landscape of my life. It kind of has been a roundabout path growing up, and now, like I said, being back here. My dad, Dr. Meyer, was a veterinarian in Bremen, and when we were little, we lived in town, but he always took us on calls to farms. So I spent we and my sisters always went to calls with my dad and drove around to farms. So I always saw barns, spent a lot of times in them. A lot of my memories are of, one of my favorite memories is being in the milk houses. And I still, when I'm in a milk house, that smell takes me right back to my childhood. And I always remember standing there hoping that the farmer would offer me a cup of milk right out of the cooler. That was the best taste, and I can walk into a barn today and it just brings back all kinds of memories. Being in the hay loft, swinging on the rope swings. When I heard some of you walk in today, as soon as you saw that barn, you had memories, and I heard you sharing, swinging on the swings, and I think a lot of us have memories. One thing that makes me feel like barns are kind of at risk is that as people get farther away in generations from the farm, they're not going to have those memories, and so the barns might not seem as important to them. So I would think somebody my age is probably only 1 or 2 generations from a farmer. My grandpa had a dairy farm, and but as there are less and less farms, there's less opportunities for kids to be in barns, so they don't quite realize the value. They're a beautiful thing on the outside, but I think the real beauty of a barn is on the inside. When you see the hand markings of what carved them by hand, the wooden pegs that hold them together, and you realize the craftsmanship that was in it. It's not just a rustic old building that's a neat thing to take photographs of, but it's true craftsmanship, and it was really meant they can last hundreds of years if they're taken care of. When we were in 4th grade, when I was in 4th grade, we moved to the farm out on the northeast side of Bremen, and at that time we started filling the barn with cows. So we had, I remember my first steers that we brought home in the cab of Dad's truck. They were little calves and Mike and Angata. So, so lots of memories, like I said. We had hay forts in the upstairs. We would do tunnels. Our church youth group would have Halloween parties in the barn. We had elaborate hay forts. We had my class built one of our homecoming floats up in our barn. And still, when I see my classmates, they say, I remember building that float up in your dad's barn. Seems like everybody likes to photograph barns. It's a very popular topic. And a picture of a rustic old barn is beautiful. But like I said, they're beautiful on the inside, and a lot of people appreciate them. Not everybody gets inside. And one thing we're doing is barn tours, which gets people inside, and I think that really kind of builds an appreciation for them. When we did a tour here in Marshall County, we toured 10 barns, and I got a phone call from a man who said that his wife has been taking photographs of barns for years. She loves barns. She's 65 years old and she's never been in a barn until this barn tour. So that was really exciting, and I felt like I wanted to see her, but I didn't get to meet her. I don't know, we saw 200 people come through that day, so I don't know who that was, but I would love to see her face when she saw the inside of her first barn. So that's my story, how I got started with the interest in barn, how it's kind of been in my blood. And now I graduated in '80, and so 25 years later, my husband and children moved back to Marshall County, and we were just looking for a place that had a little bit of land, and because I like to garden and be outside, and kind of close to my parents in Bremen. So we found a 5-acre farm in Bremen, and we found a beautiful old house built in 1883, and it happened to have a barn with it. And we looked at the barn and we said, oh, isn't that cool? The kids liked it because they could play basketball, and I said, oh, it's nice to have a barn. I didn't give it too much thought. But then I think my parents' influence gradually started sneaking back into me, and I pretty soon started, within a year, I got my first sheep and cows. And so it became a hobby farm, but it became a working farm and practical. And then I realized that, well, it's going to take some work to keep this up. We had to build pens, had to store hay, you want to keep it dry. So then I started to realize just what was involved with owning a barn. Over a few years, it started to get some leaks in the roof, and went up and looked at one of the beams was starting to get a little bad spot, so we thought, oh, no, we better look at replacing the roof. Hadn't gotten too much information on how much it would cost, but soon found out. And so we moved there in 2005, and in the fall of 2013, I got an issue of the Farmers Exchange, and I sat down to read it, and there was an article that caught my eye titled, Indiana Trails Other States in Barn Preservation Efforts. And it was a lengthy article, but it started with a story about Gwen Gutwein. She is an artist who is painting barns. She's painting 2 barns from every county in Indiana, doing paintings of them. And she wants to do this to raise appreciation of barns, and as they're disappearing, she wants people to have a record of these barns. So her paintings are quite popular. It's a heritage series, and she goes to different art shows. She's been in Elkhart at the Midwest Museum of Art. So I was interested in her story, but the line that stuck out to me was, she'd better keep busy because the old barns of Indiana are quickly disappearing. I read on, and the article had some staggering information. There were there are now an estimated 20,000 traditional barns still standing in Indiana, down from 30,000 in 2002. That's a huge loss, and I'm sure it's down from there because I've seen at least 5 fall in my neck of the woods in the last couple years. The other number that stuck out to me was that a new roof cost $10,000. That was an eye-opener because we were looking at replacing a roof. Another fact was that Representative Bob Cherry had introduced legislation to give barn owners a property tax deduction on historic barns. He'd introduced the bill 3 times and it got turned down every time. I also learned that many states have barn preservation groups, but Indiana didn't. One state that has a preservation group that I thought was great was Iowa. They have something called the Iowa Barn Foundation, and they provide grants to barn owners to help maintain their barns.
Good to see you.
I also learned that there's a national organization called the National Barn Alliance, and they work with state organizations to save barns across the country. But Indiana did not have any kind of preservation organization, and they were not affiliated with the National Barn Alliance. So I got thinking what somebody needs to do is start a foundation that would help barn owners. That's the problem, is having the money and the resources for barn owners to save their barns. It's great to appreciate a barn, but that doesn't put a new roof on it. I was thinking then about Dad's slideshows. He also used to stop and take photos of barns all the time. So he had about 100 slides of barns that would sneak into our family Christmas program every year. Oh, there's another one of Dad's barns. So Dad eventually put together a slideshow called Save the Family Farm, and he went and talked at groups like this around Bremen about and showed his photos of barns, which everybody seemed to enjoy. So I thought about him doing that, thought about the need for a new barn and how much it costs, and I thought of this idea of starting a foundation. I called Gwen Gutwein, the artist, that same day, and asked her what she'd think about getting on board with this organization as a foundation. She was very excited about the idea, and she said she'd do whatever she could do to help. Next, I called Marcia Williamson Moore, and she is a photographer. She's a professional photographer, and she's done 2 barn books that you'll find out now, like in Barnes and Nobles, called Indiana Barns. And so I also got a hold of her that same day. She was very interested. Another person that was mentioned in that article that I read in the Farmers Exchange was Maury Williamson. He was quoted several times as a barn expert. Marcia, the photographer, told me that her father was Maury Williamson. And so I said, well, she said, I'll run it past Maury. I thought, well, that's the end of it, because Gwen and Marcia and I were all creative and dreamers, and we thought it was a great idea, but we were going to get this practical man who would say that can't be done. But she called her father, and I was kind of dreading the letter that I got from him, but I opened it up and he said, it's a great idea, I'm all in support. He says, we'll get the support of Indiana Farm Bureau, and I've learned from Maury that if he wants to do something, he will get it done. Maury Williamson is a go-getter, and has been behind us all the way, and he's been a key to our success. He told me the first letter I got from him that I've got a bear by the tail, and now I realize that he knew more than I did. So Maury will be turning 90 this month, and just a little bit, because I feel he's so important in getting this started. He started the Pioneer Village at the Indiana State Fairgrounds over 50 years ago. And that's one of the best kind of pioneer reenactments in the country. So he's been influential in getting that off the ground. And at 90, he has only missed 1 state fair, and that was when he was in the war. So he's still very active, and he's a really hard worker for us as well. One of his first suggestions was to get Marsh Davis on board. Marsh Davis is the president of Indiana Landmarks, and that was also intimidating because Indiana Landmarks is the largest nonprofit preservation group in the United States. They have a multi-million-dollar budget. I thought Marsh Davis, who showed up at our first meeting in a $5,000 suit, will never want to support this. But he actually, I learned that he's very supportive of barns, and he had been one of the founders of the National Barn Alliance. So he has been a supporter from the very beginning, and Indiana Landmarks has turned out to be a great benefit to us, and they've all been really supportive. Their staff has worked for us, keeping membership lists up at no cost, so they've been a tremendous support, and we're fortunate to be affiliated with them. We are planning to become a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and right now we are recognized by the state of Indiana as a nonprofit, and until we get the federal 501c3, we have a fund with Indiana Landmarks, which allows us to take donations and contributions, and they're tax deductible because we are actually within Indiana Landmarks at this point. So that makes membership tax deductible, and so are gifts. Marsh Davis is also acting as our treasurer. So again, they've been a huge help in getting this off the ground. Another person that has been really influential and a help to us is Bob Cherry, Representative Bob Cherry. And he is the legislator who wrote the bill to give property tax deductions to barns. As I said, it was voted down 3 times. Just last year, this bill was passed, and it is now a law for historic barns built before 1950. The assessed value of the barn is completely tax deductible off of your property tax. That is non-working barn. So that means if you have your barn as your business, or say you turn it into a bed and breakfast, it's not. But if it's a barn that's a historic barn that's not being used as your business, the entire value is tax deductible. And we're fortunate to have Bob Cherry on our board, and that was a step in the doorway to get this bill expanded, but it was definitely a good step because there's a lot of barns out there that aren't being used, and those are probably the most endangered barns there are. Another thing in that bill said that Indiana Tourism Department has to allocate some effort into promoting barns as part of the tourism in Indiana. So that will be a good help too. They're calling us saying, what can we do? Because we have to do something. So they're helping promote our barn tours. Those are some of the members that I've mentioned that are on our board, and we've been really careful to have a good solid foundation. We've got 18 board members from all across the state. We're working with other organizations such as Indiana Farm Bureau, and we have several of our Farm Bureau people on our board as well. So they have a lot of connections in agriculture, and we have a lot of people with backgrounds in historic preservation. And then we also happen to have several people in the arts. And so that helps to get the word out too. I'll let you know some of the goals for our foundation. Like I said, one of the main things was to be a grassroots organization, and we want to represent all parts of the state. We're partnering with related organizations like Indiana Farm Bureau, Indiana Landmarks, and others that I'll tell you more about, and also we have now become a member of the National Barn Alliance. Another goal is to create an inventory of all the remaining barns in Indiana. That hasn't been done completely in Indiana. We kind of want to get historic barns, so we're trying to see what other barns, other states have done, Ohio and Michigan. And we're also working with the National Barn Alliance to learn what some other states have done and how we can document the barns that are left. And the DNR has some information too on historic properties. Another way we're hoping to do that is by having what we call county representatives. So we are trying to, and this is another way, like I said, to involve everybody. We're trying to have a representative from every county in Indiana who will be sort of our eyes and ears in the county. If there's an endangered barn or a important, significant barn, that we'll know about it. And eventually, these county reps can help us when we want to do a barn tour in the area to identify barns, and also to help work with us for inventory. So if anybody is interested in getting involved, that's one way that you could be very involved, was to be a county representative. As I said, educational and financial support to barn owners. We have not started giving grants. We're building a fund, but it is gradually building to that point. And I would think within the next year we'll be in a position to at least give some small matching grants so that we can make a dent in somebody trying to do some work on their barn. But for now, we have a lot of educational opportunities that we're helping barn owners with. We have a annual meeting and conference coming up on July 18th. And we've had barn workshops, and we do a newsletter with information. So some of these things are just a great way for barn owners to network and learn from each other. So even though at this point we're not giving grants, I think we still have a lot to offer barn owners in education. And then our other goal is to raise awareness. And some of these things I've mentioned, like barn tours, and other things are going to help raise awareness of the barns in the state. So I want to tell you a little bit more about the annual meeting for anybody that's interested. That is going to be a great day, and we were approached. It's July 18th. It will be held in Indianapolis at the Normandy Barn at the Indiana State Fairgrounds. And that, we were really excited. About January, I got a phone call from a representative from the National Barn Alliance, and they've been watching what we have been doing, and they said, we have made such great progress, they're really excited, and they would like to join us for the annual meeting. So the National Barn Alliance is going to be joining us, and so they will be providing some really nationally known barn contractors as speakers, and we'll have a panel of experts, of contractors, who will be there to answer people's questions about barn maintenance and ownership. And that will be their annual meeting as well. So that was really exciting, and we've been, as soon as we heard that, we really started ramping up our efforts to make this a really good day. So it'll go from 9 to 5. It will have, our keynote speaker will be Chuck Boltman, who is an architect, a barn architect from Ann Arbor. He's moved several barns. He has renovated and done a lot of work with turning them into event spaces, and just done renovations all over the country. And then, like I said, there'll be a question and answer period. For people who aren't barn owners but are just interested, we'll have several different barn artists, such as Gwen will have her painting, and Marshall will have his photographs. Dorel Harrison does barn sculptures, and we have a student in the School of Informatics who has created a computerized barn model so that you can see exactly how they are put together. We also we'll have a barn raising. We have a model scale barn that we'll be putting up that day so you can see exactly how they're put together. And we'll have a tour of 4 pre-Civil War era barns, which are now, they've been moved to Traders Point Creamery. So we're going to tour these barns at Traders Point Creamery, and that's where we'll do the barn raising. There's since I got involved with this, there's a contractor who's very well known in barn preservation, Amos Schwartz, and he is now deceased, but he was from like the Bern area, and he was in charge of moving the barns to the Traders Point Creamery. So we'll see some of his work, and then we also are going to view a film called The Resurrection of a Barn, and that is a film by one of our members who documented the resurrection of her barn, which Amos Schwartz oversaw. So that'll be a really good film, and it has some tie-ins to Amos Schwartz, and we'll get to see some of his work. That film was nominated at several film festivals. We're also having a family-style old-fashioned lunch with live music, so it'll be a very fun day. Some other outreach things we have going on is we'll have a booth at the State Fair, which we did last year also. And we had at least 500 people sign up for our mailing list last year. We need volunteers, so if anybody wants to sit at our booth for a few hours, let me know, because it's 17 days long. As I said, we had a barn tour last year. It was our first one, and since I know the barns in this area, I planned it, we included Marshall, Elkhart, and St. Joe counties. And it was a great success. We toured 10 barns, and it was a drive at your own pace. So you bought a ticket, which was a map, and that told you where all 10 barns were located in a loop. So you could go in and visit all 10 barns. And it was a really nice day. Like I said, 200 people seeing the insides of barns for the first time. And it was, luckily we had a beautiful weather, and it was, everything I heard was really good. One of the barns on the tour was Rahe Yoder's barn, and he has put together some photos in that frame there. His barn was on the tour, and that barn has been in his family since it was built. His grandfather built that barn, and the thing I love about that is he's got a handwritten ledger of every penny that was spent to build that barn. So if I remember, it was somewhere around $1,600, but you can see it when we're finished, and he's got lots of pictures. So that was a great day. And then I also we put together a book from that barn tour. You're welcome to look through that. And then one of our real barn experts put together, I sent him photos of all the barns, and he put together a really nice article about each one, and the history, the style of barn, how it was traditionally used. So I brought a couple extra than these. They have the addresses, so if you want to drive by, you would learn a lot about these barns, even though you can't go in them. And then our next barn tour is going to be in this area, coming up September 19th. So mark your calendars. We will get the word out. We have a website called indianabarns.org, and that you can find events on that if you don't remember these dates. But September 19th is our next one. It's a Saturday. I know we have one in Plymouth, and we're going to try to include Fulton County, because there's a lot of nice barns in Fulton County. So that is probably going to be a little bit east of here. So if you have any barns that you know of in that area, I'm still collecting barns for that tour. And then there's another tour on October 3rd in southern Indiana. That one will be centered around Madison. And that one was going to end on Saturday night with a barn fest. One of our board members has a property that's been in his family since it was built, and he has several barns and outbuildings that have all been restored, and he's going to do a nice celebration with camping and bonfires and hay rides, so it would be a nice fall trip to Madison October 3rd. We also have quarterly newsletters, which I brought a few copies of. If you care to, if you're interested, you might be able to take some or look at it. And then October 24th, we have a round barn workshop that we're sponsoring. That is in Hancock County. And then another really exciting thing that we have in the works is a project for the bicentennial. And 2016 is Indiana's bicentennial, and we have started a legacy project that's been endorsed by the Bicentennial Commission, and we're creating a barn quilt. And we are asking for squares, 6-inch squares, one each representing a barn from every county in Indiana. So we're hoping to have 92 squares with some kind of an actual barn, and we're reaching out to quilt guilds. Indiana State Quilt Guild is helping us with this effort, but if anybody in this group knows a quilter or is a quilter, a 6-inch square, and if you need ideas for barns, I can give you one. It doesn't have to be a barn picture, it could be a silo or a cupola or some interesting feature, but we're going to get this quilt. We've got someone who's going to piece it together and hand quilt it, and then at the end of 2016 we will auction that off, and that will go towards our fund, our endowment fund, to help support barn owners in giving grants. So spread the word about that, and again, that's on our website, so you can get a link with the information and the form to fill out for that. That's how we got started and what we've been up to for the last year and a half. So it seems like we've gotten a lot done in a short time. And like I said, I've got some brochures, feel free to take some. And as I mentioned, this has been a roundabout path for me to get here. I grew up with barns, now I'm somehow back into it. And I feel like it's been a little bit serendipitous that this would happen, but this book came out in 1997, and it was it's a great book because the barns are all, they're photographed by Donald Scott, but they are arranged by county. So all the counties, you can look up your county and find out where the barns are. But our family was really excited when this book came out because my parents' barn is in this book. And so we were all aware of that, and we were all excited about it and just proud of it. My sister got my dad a copy of this book. And then a few years ago, when I started on this interest, I got Dad's book out and was looking through it, and my kids said, well, that barn below it looks familiar. And so I started reading, and all of a sudden I realized, that's our barn. So,
Yeah, there it is.
the two barns from Marshall County are my dad's barn and our barn. So it really, like I said, it feels kind of like this, somehow I was supposed to be doing this. Like I said, everybody I think appreciates barns. I haven't talked to anybody yet who says this is a bad idea, or just, very few would say just let them fall. I think everybody appreciates them and nobody wants to see them fall. It was a eye-opener when I worked at the state fair last year because you never knew when people came up, you couldn't make a judgment. I'd get 20-year-old muscle-bound guys in there that would talk about barns. And then I'd get 90-year-old widows in there talking about memories of barns. You can't rule anybody out. It seems like everybody has an interest and an appreciation for barns. But like I said, appreciation doesn't put a new roof on a barn. So I must tell you that we are taking donations, and as I said, it's tax deductible, and that's how we're going to make a difference. We'll make a difference just in the other things we're doing, educating and the barn tours and raising appreciation. But as I said, if a person needs a new roof on their barn and they don't have $10,000, that barn might go down. So we would welcome any donations. And I just heard this morning about a barn that was saved, kind of as one of the outreach efforts, and Laura Anderson just told me today that as a result of the barn tour she went on in September, that they have now saved their Shelby County barn. So we have success right there. So I just want to say, if we lose our barns, it's going to change our landscape in Indiana forever. We take them for granted a little bit, but it's part of our landscape, it's part of our growing up. I'm happy to have the memories from my childhood from the barns. I'm happy my kids have memories of being in the barns, and I hope that my grandchildren do too, and I hope that your children and the future generations can get out and play in a hay mow and swing on a rope swing. So thank you. I should have brought, this was built by an Amish man in Elkhart County, and you're welcome to look at it. It's really well made, and yeah, you can look in it. This was built when the Midwest Museum of Art had Gwen Gutwein's show. They had this built for her presentation. So after they were finished with it, they sold it to us. So this is now owned by us.
They call that a hip roof barn.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the hip roof being this shape.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's the way all barns were at one time,
Mm-hmm.
that basic shape.
And what I have heard is that they started off, originally I think they were triangular, and then as more room for hay was needed, they expanded that way. Then they started making them bigger as farms became larger.
That's a kind of a new type of a barn. Most of the barns were clear up here like this, and then it came down like that, and then down like this up there. That's a hip roof barn, but most of them in Indiana are not built like that. Yeah.
See, that's what I remember from Minnesota,
Mm-hmm.
that they were mostly like
Yeah.
this.
And I think people, like whatever immigrant group came to that area, influenced the style of barns there. Because you'd see different styles all over the country, in different regions. I know there's one of the people from National Barn Alliance is talking about a Dutch barn that you don't really see here. And so we decided the barn that, he has a Dutch barn model, but we decided to go with the English barn model at our meeting because it's more representative of the Indiana type barn. And this book and these papers tell a lot about the different barn styles, if you're interested, which I learned a lot from that. Any other questions?
How do you become a member?
You take a brochure, and there's a membership form on the back that you can mail in, or you could fill it out right now and give it to me. And there's also a form on our website, but yeah, please take a brochure and become a member. And we are doing quarterly newsletters. Right now, we've only done 2, but they've gone out to all 500 people on our mailing list, which is pretty expensive, so it's going to end up being just members. But we kind of wanted all those people who had signed up to get some information, so these will be going to members, probably starting with the next newsletter.
Well, I want to thank Carolyn. It was very interesting, very informative, and there's no more questions. You're welcome to get your brochure and look at the pictures. So,
Thank you.
thank you.